Fear Not, Episode 143. Hi, I'm Billy Atwell, and I believe that consistently facing your fears is the only way to realize your truest self and to make those confident choices that will help you to obtain your deepest held hopes and dreams. I have faith that this podcast series will show you that you are not alone, that it will strengthen you and give you courage to face your fears, and that it will help you to permanently cross over into a life of living beyond your fears. Join me on this journey as we listen and learn from others as they share their experiences in facing and overcoming their own fears. Hello, everybody. Today you and I are going to be joined by ldoyle. Welcome, Laura. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Laura is the New York Times best-selling author of The Surrendered Wife, The Surrendered Single, and recently, The Empowered Wife. Her books have been translated into 16 languages and published in 27 countries. Over 150,000 women credit her with not only saving their relationships, but also showing them how to become desired, cherished, and adored for life. She is the founder of ldoyle Connect, an international relationship coaching company that teaches women the intimacy skills they need to have passionate, peaceful relationships. She's also appeared on the CBS Evening News, Dateline NBC, The Today Show, Good Morning America, and The View. She has been written about in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, the Washington Post, the London Telegraph, and the New Yorker. She's also a regular contributor to the Huffington Post. Laura, can you take a few moments to fill in those gaps and maybe also give us a brief glimpse of your personal life?
Absolutely. I mean, the reason I'm so passionate about what I do is because I was the perfect wife until I actually got married. And then I tried to improve my husband. I tried to help him dress better and be a little more ambitious at work, and showed him how to be tidier around the house. And I couldn't understand why he didn't want to spend any time with me. In fact, he was more interested in watching TV and watching reruns than he was in spending any time with me or even making love to me. So I was very lonely and unhappy with my marriage. And I knew that the answer would be to drag him to marriage counseling. So I did that. And I thought, well, now the counselor will fix him and then I'll finally be happy, because I think that's how it works. But of course that didn't work, as you already know. And that's when we became most hopeless. And I thought that I was either going to have to divorce him or spend the rest of my life in a loveless relationship. So I decided I was going to get divorced. And there was just one problem, and that was that I was too embarrassed to get divorced. So I started asking women who'd been married for what seemed like an eternity for their advice on how to make their marriages happy, how I could make my marriage happy, how they had done it. And the things that they said didn't even make sense to me. They didn't even go along at all with the things that I'd been seeing, the things I'd been taught growing up and the things I'd seen in my parents' relationship. And so I didn't think they were right, and so I wasn't willing to try them. But over time, desperation won out, and I thought, I'm just going to make my marriage into a laboratory, and I'll try all these suggestions. And if they worked, I kept them, and if they didn't, I threw them out. And what emerged was what I now call the 6 intimacy skills. I didn't even know there were skills. I thought if you just fell in love, you just would figure it out, and everything would be fine. But that's sort of like if you had a 16-year-old kid and you just said, hey, you're 16, here's the car keys. Why don't you take the car for a spin now? That's not what we do. We make them study the rules of the road and learn how to drive behind the wheel and then take a test. And only then do they get a license and insurance and everything else. But there was no relationships 101 at my school. So I don't know where I was supposed to learn this, but I just remember I'd been practicing the 6 intimacy skills for a little while. And one time I walked through the door and my husband's face lit up. He was happy to see me. And that had been gone for a long time. So I thought, wow, this is working. And then I knew that I could no longer control my husband. That was part of the problem I'd had before. So I thought, I'll just control my friends and I will make them do what I'm doing to improve their marriages. And so I did. And They did, and it was just crazy. They came back with these amazing stories of how, like one woman's husband won the sales contest at work and took her on the most romantic getaway of their entire lives. And another one said they'd been bickering about him painting the family room for months. And he just got up one morning and said, I'm going to paint the family room. So we thought we really stumbled onto something. And I ended up writing it down for somebody's cousin in Florida wanted to know what we were doing. And I wrote it down, and that became my first book. And when Dateline NBC actually came and did an investigative report on my methods, that book went to #1 on Amazon and became a New York Times bestseller. It's been translated and published in many countries now. And we have a worldwide movement of surrendered wives. And a lot of people hear that phrase, surrendered wife, and they think, oh, obedient wife or subservient wife, but that's not it at all. It's just surrendering something we all have to do. I mean, if you're stuck in traffic, you might wish that the traffic would move, but you can't make it move. But you could use that time to listen to music or talk on the phone or listen to an audiobook. You could be grateful that you had that solitude. Or you could just grip the wheel and, try to change lanes and, kind of agonize about it. But that wouldn't be surrendering. So a surrendered wife just knows she can't change anyone besides herself. So she doesn't try. She won't tell her husband what to wear or what to do at work or what to eat for lunch. Instead, she focuses on her own happiness, and that in turn improves the intimacy. And today, I have that marriage that I dreamed I would have when I said I do. In fact, recently I was brushing crumbs off of the countertop, and my husband said, "Don't move." And he got out his phone and started taking my picture like I'm the supermodel that he's been married to for 28 years. So it's been a really gratifying journey.
That sounds great. And thank you so much for sharing all that. Laura, we traditionally start off on our Friday shows by having our guest share with us what their definition of fear is. So would you do that for us today?
Yes. Well, one of the big discoveries I made on this journey is that I was a very fearful person. And the way my fear manifested was control. And I didn't realize this. I thought I was just a little bit more organized. I thought I was a little, I was better and more efficient at things. I had this little superiority complex. But it was actually all about my fear. If you're not afraid, you don't have to try to control things. Like if I'm not afraid I'm going to be stuck in traffic, I don't have to tell him to stay off the freeway at this hour because it's rush hour. Or, if you're not afraid he's going to forget the kids to pick them up, you don't have to remind him like it's almost time to pick up the kids. Or if you're not afraid he's going to have to pay a late fee because he forgot to pay something, you don't have to remind him to do that. So I found that almost everything that was coming out of my mouth was this control, and underneath that control was fear. So for me, my definition of fear is whenever I'm trying to control someone other than myself.
Laura, since you do specialize in helping people have intimacy, and since that's such a big fear, right? I mean, fear of relationships, fear of being yourself, being exposed to that. What can you teach us today so that we can have those passionate and probably really important from my perspective, peaceful relationships?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of my favorite quotes is from Ambrose Redmoon, who said that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision that something else is more important. And I always think that old song, right? It said the greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved in return. And that has exactly described this journey I've been on in terms of learning to relinquish that inappropriate control of someone else. And so for me, what happened was when I first went to that marriage counselor, who wasn't very helpful at all, she did point out that I was controlling. And as soon as she said it, I think I resisted it a little bit. I was like, no, I'm not. It's just that I'm the only adult around here. He's like a big kid, I think I still kind of clung to my defenses. But after I did recognize that I was controlling, I said, okay, you're right, I'm controlling. Now what? And she said, yeah, just stop being so controlling. But that was impossible for me. I didn't know how to do that. That I needed a step-by-step system. And now that's what we have. I have created a world-famous system for relinquishing inappropriate control of my husband. And what's wonderful about it is as soon as I learned to relinquish control of him, the man who wooed me returned as soon as I implemented the steps. And so there are steps that any woman can follow, these 6 intimacy skills. And the first one comes down to, and I think this is a really important one, and that is that you replenish your spirit by doing at least 3 things a day for your own happiness. So just frivolous fun. I'm not talking about 8 hours of sleep or 5 fruits and vegetables or 30 minutes of cardio. I'm just talking about taking a hot bath or going for a walk if it brings you pleasure, or maybe playing your guitar or meeting a friend for a cup of coffee. So it doesn't have to reduce greenhouse gas emissions or feed the hungry or anything else. It's just to make you happy, because I know for me, when I'm depleted, the world looks wrong. I think that everything's as bad as I feel like it is in that moment. And sometimes all I have to do is march myself into bed for a nap, and an hour later when I wake up, everything looks a little bit better to me. So just that act of fulfilling myself, just giving myself that pleasure, really made a big difference in my ability to practice all the other intimacy skills so that I could have the kind of relationship that I wanted, which naturally does take a little bit of energy, just like everything else that's worthwhile in life.
So, what are some of these skills, these levels that you teach? What's the first step? What's the
Well, yeah. So another piece of relinquishing inappropriate control is one of my favorite things is expressing my desires in a way that inspires. And so what we found, oh, in fact, I'll ask you this question, Billy. I was just thinking back to the last time you were in a relationship. How important was it to you that she was happy?
very?
I love that answer because I've actually asked thousands of men that question all over the world, and they all say the same thing. They say it's very important. It's the most important thing. It's everything. In the UK, they say it's imperative. And so sometimes women don't feel that this is the case, but it always is the case in my experience. And one of the ways that we can tap into men's natural hero gene, you can really trigger that hero gene, is by expressing a pure desire. And so I was in this unfortunate habit of just complaining in my early marriage. So I would say, John, this kitchen is a disaster. And since men can't really even hear complaining, all my husband heard was, John, blah, 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 blah. Right? He didn't really even retain the rest of it. And I was thinking he was going to jump off the couch and start cleaning the kitchen. And I got to tell you, that never happened. So finally, I tried everything, right? Begging, cajoling, crying, everything. It didn't work. So finally, I one day I just said, I would, John, I would love a clean kitchen. He goes, okay, I'll clean it. And that was like 17 years ago, and he's been doing it ever since. So once he knew how to make me happy, it was just remarkable how quickly he leapt into action. And we see examples of this over and over again. I remember one woman was just reading about this in the book, The Empowered Wife, actually. And so she was sitting on the couch and she said, her husband was walking by. She goes, I would love a glass of wine. And he goes, oh, I don't think we have any. And she goes, I know. I just was wanting one. So no expectation, no attachment. And the next thing is she goes back to her reading. Next thing she knows, he's coming down the stairs with his keys and their son. And he's saying to the son, you want to go to the store with me? And she goes, where are you going? He goes, to get you some wine. So just knowing that that would make his wife happy just inspired him to, jump up and go to the store, for example. So it's just a wonderful thing to know how to say the end result that you're looking for without any control or manipulation or criticism. So if you, for instance, say, I want you to go get me some wine, that wouldn't have the same results because that's control. And husbands are geniuses at picking up on when we're trying to control them. And they resist it mightily because they want to have autonomy over their own lives, just like we all do, really, but especially men. And so, if you just say the final outcome, what you're wanting, if you just say, I just would love some wine, then you get a totally different result. So I would love to actually do an exercise with you right now if you want. So I just invite you to think of someone that you are tempted to control at times, right? We all have that person in our lives, right? It could be your mom or your kids or a friend where you think, gosh, if they would just do what I say, everything would work out great, right? We always, we all have that fantasy at times. So just think about that person and think about the specific thing that you would like to control about them. And I'll give you an example here. So one of mine that still comes up even after all these years is my husband has his own business, and sometimes his clients will pay him late, or they'll just pay him very slowly. And so he'll be telling me about this, and I still think, oh, I want to jump in and tell him how to collect, or I want to collect for him. I'm going to like call those people and I'm going to make them pay. And so the first question that I ask myself about this is, what is it I'm afraid of, right? All control is based in fear. And fear and control are opposites of intimacy. So if you want to have intimacy, you got to let go of the control. And if you want to be in control, you get to choose that too. It's always up to you. But the intimacy is going to go. And so in this situation, when I ask myself what I'm afraid of, and that's the next question for you, by the way, in this exercise, what is it you're afraid of? What is it you're afraid is going to happen if you don't tell your mom that she needs to go to the doctor, if your kids don't get their grades up, or whatever it is, what is it you're afraid is going to happen? And if I ask myself that, I'm like, well, I'm afraid they're not going to pay him. And that still kind of doesn't really have anything to do with me, right? So if I'm really honest, if I take the elevator all the way down to the basement floor, I'm afraid I'm going to have to go without something. Like I'm going to have to skip a mani-pedi or something because we won't be able to afford it because my husband's clients didn't pay him. So then the next question to ask yourself is that fear realistic? And so for me, I have to say in my situation, my husband's had his business for a long time, and he has actually even mostly the same clients he's had for many years, and he does pretty well. And so my fear that I'm going to have to go without something is probably not all that realistic. So for me, the answer is no. But for you, it might be that the answer is yes. It might be realistic. Maybe your mom is going to get diabetes if you don't, if she doesn't start controlling her blood sugar or something like that, right? I'm just giving kind of random examples, but you can answer these questions for yourself, right? Is it realistic? Yes or no? And then the next question is, can you really control it anyway? Thinking about my situation with my husband, I like to think that I could control his collections. I can control his accounts receivables. I mean, could I do a better job? I don't know. Probably not, right? He's been running this business for a long time. He probably knows better than me how to do it. So is it really something I can control? I'm going to have to say no, not in this situation. So the same thing probably with your kids or your mom. But the answer could be either one. Maybe it is something you really could control. So just answer it for your situation. And then the fourth and final question to ask yourself about this fear is, if I indulge it, if I try to control this other person, is it going to be worth the intimacy that it's going to cost me to try to control it? Because there's always a price to pay. For me, most of the time, it's no longer worth the price of admission to tell my husband how to try to collect from his clients. I would rather hold hands, laugh together, snuggle. So I'm not going to go there. Too expensive for me. But you get to decide in every moment. You're always the expert on your own life. You get to decide, no, in this case, it's really worth it to me to try to control the situation or not. And I find if I can just take myself through, if I've done my self-care, if I have some reserves, if I'm well rested and happy and filled up and just feeling good, and I can just take myself through those 4 questions when I'm tempted to control, one of those questions is going to stop me in my tracks from indulging my urge to control. And therefore, it's going to be me. I'll be able to prioritize the intimacy as the most important thing. And because of that, I now have a lot of intimacy in the bank. Things are pretty easy. I feel safe and special most of the time with my husband. And I love that. So those 4 steps have been really helpful, and you can use those anytime. You can pull those out anytime you feel the urge to be controlling. Just like a small sample of the whole skill of relinquishing inappropriate control. Obviously, there's much more to it, and there's, of course, all the other skills, and they all work together. So, and I love for all women to get all 6 intimacy skills, because I'm on a mission to end world divorce by making sure that every woman who wants to have an amazing relationship has the skills to do it. It is just a matter of skills, just like learning to play piano or make an omelet or anything else. And so I just want to give that taste and say that there's plenty more where that came from.
Laura, what parting advice could you give us today?
Well, I have this one relationship tip that has just been really magical for me. And so I'd love to teach you this phrase. It's a way to help have the person you're with open up and really share what's on their heart and mind. And so it's just 3 words. And the magical phrase that I use, those 3 words, is I hear you. That's it. I hear you. It's not I hear you and I think, or I hear you, but what about this? It's just those words. So you're not agreeing, you're not disagreeing, you're just bearing witness. You're just letting them know that their words are important. What they're saying means something to you. You're just bearing witness to their experience. And we all have a deep need to be heard and understood. And so one of the things I'll occasionally do is I'll decide, like, okay, for the next hour, I'm just going to hear my husband by saying, I hear you. And it's just amazing how much he has to say when I'm really become that good listener that I want to be, so that I can have that magical connection that I love to have.
Thank you so much for that, Laura. And I want to let everyone know, too, that Laura has generously donated a copy of her book, The Empowered Wife, that we'll be giving away. So if you would like an opportunity to win, visit the giveaways page at livingbeyondyourfears.com and submit your free entry form today. Laura, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today and sharing your time and your wisdom and helping everyone to get over that fear of intimacy. I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for joining me today. And remember, you cannot achieve everything, but you do have the God-given ability to achieve anything. So stay focused, out of fear, and keep on keeping on. Until next time, be well and peaceful. For more information on today's episode and guest, or for resources that will assist you in overcoming your fears, visit livingbeyondyourfears.com. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast, where 3 times a week we move to a life beyond our fears.